I really like plants a lot. It's kind of like common sense, but you'd be surprised. Hey y'all, it's Jaylyn, and today we're gonna be talking about houseplant basics. So if you follow me on Instagram or my blog, you may know that I'm kind of a certifiable plant lady. I've always grown up with plants. My mom had a lot of plants growing up, but I recently got into plants around the first of the year. I've had a few plants basically my whole life that I've kept personally, but my plant collection has kind of exploded. I now have too many plants. Not too many, because apparently NASA says that you should have one plant per 100 square foot of your living area, and I don't have that many. And if NASA says you need one per 100 square foot, I think that you should really have double that. So a lot of people think that they have a black thumb, which I hate that term. I really do. I don't think anybody really has a black thumb. I think there are certain things that you need to learn and certain things that you should probably take in consideration when you're going to start growing houseplants. But I think there's a houseplant out there for everybody. And I'll be talking about the basics of like what kind of soil you want to use, the potting, what pots you want to use, humidity, environment, good beginner houseplants, that kind of stuff. Okay, so a few good beginner houseplants I think are the golden pothos or devil's ivy. That was actually my first plant I got in 1999, and this is my original plant. It has gone through a lot because I wasn't always kind to it, didn't always really know how to help it. So golden pothos, they are very easy to care for. They're really hard to kill, and they don't take a lot of care at all. They just want to be put in a semi-bright spot with watering like maybe once every 2 weeks. They're very easy to overwater, and if your leaves are turning yellow, the whole leaf, that is a sign that you're overwatering them. Another really good beginner plant, I feel, is a jade or just a basic succulent. I started out with a jade because my mom grew jades. Mine is probably about 8 inches right now, and it doesn't take a lot of care. It needs to be put in a bright spot as well, but not direct sun. You can try it in direct sun, but I found that a lot of times it will make your plant, it's a little too hard on your plant. But mine's in a window with really bright filtered light, and I water it maybe once a month. You water it when the leaves start to shrivel a little bit. It doesn't take a lot of care. It wants to be left alone most of the time. Another great beginner plant is the peace lily. It is a plant that likes some moisture and really thrives in humidity, but it blooms all the time and it's gorgeous. It's actually also a really great plant if you don't have good light in your house. If you don't get much light at all, some houseplants cannot thrive in that kind of environment, but peace lilies actually will bloom more when it's darker, when they're in a darker area. So if you have a place like that, peace lily is the way to go. So next we're going to talk about the pots and the potting soil that you use to plant your plants. The potting soil that you want to use really depends on the kind of plant that it is, but for a lot of houseplants, houseplants that are not succulents, so a lot of kind of rainforesty, typical houseplants, not succulents, okay? I like to use the Miracle-Gro Moisture Control potting soil. It's a pretty rich potting soil. It has some perlite in it, but I found that it works for most everything. Most of all of my indoor plants are potted in Miracle-Gro Moisture Control potting soil. I will leave a link below, and you can find it pretty much anywhere. You can get it on Amazon, but you can also buy it at Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, pretty much everywhere. So for succulents, you want to plant them in potting soil that's made for succulents. I've had a little bit, so this is kind of iffy. Some of my succulents are planted in the Moisture Control Miracle-Gro potting soil, and they do fine inside, but I had my aloe plant back here outside planted in the Moisture Control potting soil, and for some reason it just was not doing well. It actually turned gray. It turned completely gray, and it scared me. I thought it was gonna die. So I brought it in and I repotted it in potting soil that's made for succulents, cactus, and palms. The succulent potting mix or the cactus potting mix has more sand in it and it drains better. And it's not quite as rich. I was also told by a friend of mine who also happens to work in the Lowe's garden department, that the potting soils have, I guess, sort of like fertilizer or nutrients in them specific to certain plants. So it could be that the potting soil that I was using was not giving my aloe what it needed. Repotting it, it's actually turning more green now instead of gray. So I think we're on the right track. Okay, in the pots that you want to put them in, you know, when you buy them from a box store or from a nursery, usually they're in plastic nursery pots. Those are fine, they're just not very pretty, and I find myself that I want to repot them. I have a thing for terracotta, so most of my plants are in terracotta. The reason that they are is just because I like them, but also my mom told me once that plants, the roots need to breathe. So if they were in their natural environment in the planet somewhere and planted in the soil, you know, the soil is rich with nutrients, which is, you know, so you want a good potting mix. There's also, like, the soil breathes. It's not sealed off, and so your plant's roots like to breathe. A natural type pot, like a terracotta or just some other sort of ceramic non-sealed pot, can be good for plants' roots. That said, if you live in a really dry environment, terracotta can dry your plants out more frequently. So you may need to adjust your watering schedule. I live in the desert, and so my plants, I haven't really dealt with a lot of dry out using terracotta, but I do water my plants pretty regularly. I look at my plant and I take note of if it looks sad, and I stick my finger in the soil, which you should always do, to test for the moisture of the soil. I haven't noticed dry out, but if you're someone who doesn't want to pay a lot of attention to their plants, dry out could be an issue for you. Another reason I like terracotta is because they pretty much always come with a drainage hole. And let me tell you, when I first started really being interested in plants was probably 4 or 5 years ago. I had my first apartment by myself and I wanted to grow patio plants, and I killed every one of them except for my ivy. And my ivy didn't do well, let me tell you. And most of the time it was because I picked a pretty pot that didn't have a drainage hole, and I drown them, for lack of a better word. Another piece of wisdom that my mom gave me is plants don't like wet feet. And what that means is they want soil that drains. You know, that doesn't mean that they want dry soil necessarily, but they don't want to sit in water. If their roots are soaking in water all the time, a lot of times that can lead to root rot, too much water, and it can drown your plant, cause fungus, cause mold, and kill your plant, and that's not what you want. Make sure, no matter what, I don't care how cute the pot is, if it doesn't have a drainage hole, it's not going to be good for your plants. The only thing that you could do is if you found a fantastic pot that you love so much and you set a pot with a drainage hole inside and propped it up so it didn't sit in the water. You're going to have to dump that pot because you don't want water just sitting there forever. When you replant into another pot, you want it to only be 2 inches larger than the pot it's already in. So if you have a 4-inch pot from the nursery, the biggest you want to go is a 6-inch pot. And the reason for that is for roots. Take an ivy, for instance. Ivies are known for their really long, leggy, beautiful stems, and they overfill their pots a lot, and sometimes they reach the ground. The trails are gorgeous. But if you pot it in a pot that's way too big for the ivy, it's gonna spend all of its energy and time rooting and finding and building roots in the bottom. And it's important to have a good root system in your plants, but that's not the pretty part of plants, right? You want them to produce where you can see it. So you want them to produce new leaves and flowers. And if they're spending so much energy building their roots, they're not going to be producing up top. So you want to plant them in an appropriate size pot. That's why you don't want to go more than 2 inches larger. Watering. So obviously all the different plants have different watering needs. Can't exactly tell you when you need to water, but what's worked for me is having a schedule. So I water my plants on Monday and Thursday. You know, I check in on them every day just to see how they're doing. Exception to the rule are my ivies. I don't water them on a set day because they don't always need it. So when my ivies start to droop and the soil is very dry, I'll give them a shower and I'll just put them in my sink, shower them down, get the soil wet, let the pot drain all the way through, and then set them up. And that works really well. And I find that for my different ivies, that's probably every 2.5 weeks or so. And my succulents too. I don't water them every week. You can choose your own days. You don't even have to have 2 days. You can have 1 day if you want. But I found that if I really water on Mondays and Thursdays, I don't forget to water them. So my plants do really well. A lot of indoor plants love humidity. That's just kind of how they work. Most of them come from like a rainforest kind of setting, and it's important that you give your plants humidity, but in the winter especially, when you have the heater on, it draws humidity out of the air, and that can be pretty hard on plants. But what I do is every morning, no matter what, I go through and I spray the leaves of my plants with just a squirt bottle and some water until the leaves are moist, and I do that in the morning so that they have time to dry out throughout the day. Another thing you can do to increase the humidity and help your plants indoors is by grouping them together. I have 3 plants over here kind of all huddled together. I have 2 over here close together, although 1 is in a terrarium. And then on the opposite wall, I have a bunch of plants all together, huddled, and that huddling them together like that will help increase their humidity. It gives them a better environment. Grouping them together is good for them. So we went over the types of houseplants that are great for beginners, the types of potting soil that you want to use, the types of pots that you want to use, and environment humidity. I think that's pretty much all the houseplant basics that I have for you. You know, there are things that as you grow, you'll learn. I'm just starting to really look into shining my leaves, really fertilizing the plants when they need it, and trying my hand at some plants that may not be super beginner friendly. So I will be back with more plant tips. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. I'll try my best to answer them. Thanks so much for watching, and happy planting.